The inventor of the internet proposes ways to save it. I'm Marco Perri. Welcome to the Perri platform. Misinformation, fake news, data collection, censorship, spying. These are some of the many issues that burden the internet today. The government, corporations, and even individuals all play with these tools to varying degrees, and that makes people believe that the internet needs saving. One of those people with that belief, that there needs to be some saving, is the creator of the internet himself. Tim Berners-Lee. He was credited with inventing the World Wide Web in 1989. He's about 65 years old today. And I don't know about you, but for me that was kind of shocking to realize that the creator of the internet is alive, and that he's 65 years old only. It puts into perspective just how little we've had the internet around for, and how far it's helped us propel human society in that short span of time. Truly a miracle, and the inventor is still with us. So Tim also has a foundation, and within that foundation that he operates, he's come forward with a plan called the Contract for the Web. If you didn't know, Canada actually has something similar to that in the works, and we call it the Digital Charter. They're essentially ways to structure how we go about using the internet and how companies and government interact with the users on there. So this contract that Tim has laid out for the web, it states 9 core principles for government, companies, and people, 3 for each, that will make the internet great again. That's the vision here, the end goal. So today, let's go through this proposal and see how it stacks up. So first of all, we have the government section. Principle 1, ensure everyone can connect to the internet. So that really comes down to 2 things, affordability and access. Affordability has been a key issue within Canada because, as I'm sure you're aware, we have 3 major telecoms who control the market, and there is some soft collusion that goes on. It's undeniable. They rack the prices up so they can all benefit. There isn't much in the way of competition. So they state that 1 gigabyte of data should only equal about 2% of your monthly income, and they want that to be the case for everyone by 2025. So let's take a look at what Canada currently has available. A $30 plan from Fido gives you that 1 gigabyte of data, and if you want that to be 2% of your monthly income, you only have to make about $1,500. So we do meet that criteria in Canada, but it makes me wonder though, why is the bar set so low? If Canada, a country with widely expensive cellular services that's documented on the international scale, everyone knows it, Canada is super overpriced. If we already meet that goal 5 years ahead of schedule, it signifies to me that maybe we need to alter these numbers a little bit because Canada has rates higher than some developing countries already. It's insane. Now the question does come into play when you look at that percentage. The percentage of income for a Canadian who generally has a higher salary versus someone in a developing world, that may be why they chose to go with that 2% figure, but still, I feel like more tailored solutions should have been implemented. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. Telecom in Canada is crazy, but it meets the criteria. So now to the second principle. Keep the internet up and available all the time. And keep in mind too, these first 3 principles are in relation to the government. I agree with that 100%. When the government shuts down the internet, there really is only one reason why they would do it. It's meant to keep people in the dark. It's undeniable. The debate now comes in, is that good or is that bad? I'll say largely it's bad. The only benefits to that might be to stop the spread of hysteria. If you're in a situation as the government where your populace is going off the rails and you have to curb it because somehow, some way, the internet's leading to traction that's going to be destructive for the country, then maybe. There might be cases like that. But when you open that door, it gives governments like what we see in Iran the power to turn off the internet whenever they want, under that guise, which might just be a rouse for trying to cover up some of their own covert intentions. For example, shutting down the internet when there are protests. People cannot coordinate anymore. They can't protest effectively, and it allows Iran to do things like kill protesters. And now, because the means of communication among the populace is stripped away, you are forced to rely solely based on what the government tells you, like the olden days. They might tell you those were rioters, and you don't really have the information to combat that. You have to take them at their word because without the internet, it's hard to accumulate and aggregate data. You know what you see, but you don't know the entire picture. The government does though, and you're basically being fed a narrative. I don't believe there's much good to be had in that, and I do agree with the contract. The internet should be left up all the time, But there are rare circumstances where you can do it, but I don't think they happen as much as the governments want you to believe. It's a dangerous tool that benefits the government tremendously with marginal gains for the citizen. In fact, it might actually do you a major disservice. I don't think that's how things should work. So, now to the third principle. Respect and protect people's fundamental online privacy and data rights. Now, at core, I believe in that, but the issue is, keep in mind from the government perspective, there is no standard rule set. There isn't a global accordance with online policies that every country has signed on to or something like that. These standards vary differently based on where you live. But the article and this charter here, they provide some examples of what government should be doing, such as minimizing data collection to what's absolutely necessary, the right to correct wrong data and whatnot. So it's very good stuff. Most of it is basic level, so I do feel like it's attainable. Nothing in here is truly groundbreaking. And if we assume that's all in the name of respecting and protecting people's fundamental online privacy and data rights, I'm on board with that. So that wraps up the government principles. Now we move on to the 3 principles for companies. First, make the internet affordable and accessible. So that basically echoes the first point for the government. It's really a joint effort here. The government and corporations have to work together to make sure everyone's getting internet at an affordable rate and that it's accessible. So yeah, that's a joint effort, and that's it for that. So second, respect people's privacy and personal data to build online trust. 100%. That is sorely lacking, especially the point about trust. Nobody trusts Facebook anymore after all of those dozens of scandals. We need companies to be a little bit more serious about data, and we're not asking for too much either. First of all, we don't want to be surprised when our data gets leaked because the company has bad security, or if they're doing it on purpose, they're scalping data from us without us knowing it, and they're selling it to make a major profit. That's not in the best interest of the consumer, and you can see why the individual has developed a sense of distrust to social media and tech conglomerates. We understand that that's how they make money. Without their data collection methods and selling advertisements, well, how could they provide you a service as great as Facebook or Google for free? The answer is they couldn't, but there's a sense of trust that can still be had. There's a middle ground here, and it really comes via transparency. You have to let consumers know what's going on, what your policies are, and be upfront. We just want to be in the loop about it, and we can make an educated decision if we still want to be a part of the process. If Facebook comes out and tells you, we are doing this with your data, this is how we get it, if you want to use our platform, that's the cost. It's free for you, but we make our money via your data. That's a fair stance to have, and the educated consumer can make a choice then. That's not happening though. We're signing 1,000-page documents without reading it through. Facebook is doing everything they can to hide that from you, and you're signing up without knowing the consequences. That's not transparent, and that's not how you build trust with the consumer base. I agree 100% with this principle here. We need more of it. Now, finally, the third pillar is you develop technologies that support the best in humanity and challenge the worst. This is where the fairy tale narratives begin to come in, really. That's unrealistic. Companies will obviously say they're going to do that, but I guarantee you they won't in all circumstances. They're going to collect the goodwill from it. It's a feel-good narrative. Yeah, we're going to support the best in humanity and challenge the worst. You have our word on that, but you really don't. You're going to get the goodwill for signing off, but it's contrary to the very notion of what a corporation stands for. They have one goal and one aim in mind. That is the bottom line. Now we have the development of such terms such as the triple bottom line, where corporations start caring, but at the end of the day, none of that is possible without the first line, which is profit. That's the driving motivation, regardless of if you want to accept it or not. So, based on that, these are corporations we're talking about here, an entity that places the bottom line above anything else systematically. They are not a worthy arbitrator of what's best for humanity and what's not. That's more so the role of society, aka the individuals within it, and to a lesser degree, the government. That's not something corporations should be having a hand in. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. This placement of putting this pillar under the corporation tab, to me, is idealistic to a fault, and so far is the most useless because I don't think it's going to happen, and if it does, it's going to be tainted with an agenda. This is just asking for trouble. When supporting the best of humanity is not profitable anymore, there goes your support, and they're going to support the next best thing that still brings in that cash flow. You don't want them deciding what this is for humanity. That's our role, not the companies. Now, finally, we move on to the citizens' principles. The first is to be creators and collaborators on the web. That's fairly obvious. We already do that. pretty much since the beginning of the internet. So moving on to the next one now is to build strong communities that respect civil discourse and human dignity. That's a major key, super important, and super lacking. The principle really is touching on polarization and toxicity. To another degree, also intolerance of opposing viewpoints. People online are super angry at each other, especially when you don't agree with them. I think it's attributable, in part, to having a screen between you two. In real life, when you're talking to another human being, there are certain social cues that play into the equation. Online, you don't have that. You actually don't get to experience the consequence of your actions. You can make someone cry, but it's likely you'll never know about it. You can make someone feel bad about the way they think, what they believe in, but you wouldn't know about it. You're going to get the likes and the retweets for saying what's popular. That's all that matters to you. I think we have to foster, as they say, a more intact community that respects civil discourse and human dignity. Civil discourse is amazing, and it's what enabled us to grow as a society. Having exchanges and weeding out the bad ideas. You can't have that if all you do is demonize the opposition. The dark side of social media has given way to things like groupthink and echo chambers, and people just getting riled up, getting these same narratives that they subscribe to being juxtaposed to the opposition as if they are there to tear everything down. It's a toxic mentality, and not so much in Canada, but in America, it's almost as if you have two entirely different groups of people who are not coexisting. The left and the right, they're not compatible at all. Hopefully Canada does not go down that same route, because it leads to turmoil, and eventually it can lead to a breaking point where things like rebellions and violence start to stem up. Intolerance is, funnily enough, being perpetrated by those who claim to be super tolerant. It's crazy, hypocritical, and we do need that change. Now, finally, the last principle is to defend your right to the web. So I say yes to that. Never stand for injustice towards the tool that has elevated humanity so highly in such a short span of time. Don't stand for governments taking that away from you. Don't stand for corporations abusing it. And don't allow you individuals, your peers, your partners, your community, to tarnish it by making it toxic. This really summarizes the crux of it. We have to stand up and be willing to fight for the internet to shape it into what we really think it can be, the ideal here. Now, after all the talk of the principles in the charter, generally I agree. I think we can make this even more concise though. The real two plagues of the internet are disinformation and data abuse. There are other things too, but these are the two perpetrators that lead to people believing that they have to save it. So for disinformation, the goal really is to educate the masses and promote fact-checking and healthy debate. You have to be able to think critically about what you're being fed and not just accept it blindly because you like the notions within it. There are blatant examples of fake news and disinformation that we can call out and support removing, but it's not black and white. When people say the answer to fake news is simply tech giants banning it, that is a simple-minded response to the situation, and it's not going to help anything because that's only applicable for the black and white. But for the gray area, it's not as simple as banning the content because it's hard to identify what that is. How about this? Here's an example of a gray claim. Trudeau is corrupt. Okay, is that fake news? Is that reality? It's debatable. It might not be inherently true or false, but people may claim it's disinformation or they may claim it's not. It's not as obvious as something like saying Trudeau is really a Taliban spy who has infiltrated our government. That's something we can agree on that platforms can handle, but it comes down to the degree of misinformation. That is to the highest degree. It's obviously fake, and it might not impact that many people. Most people will see something like that and be like, oh, that's ridiculous. But when it comes to the gray examples, those are actually the most dangerous. Some of them are impossible to regulate, so it really is a joint effort on behalf of the individuals to better equip themselves and the corporations to remove those blatant examples. Oddly enough, the lesser obvious and thus harder to regulate are the most damaging because they're the easiest to believe and they can affect the most amount of people. The claim that Trudeau is a member of the Taliban might get a couple believers here and there, but it's obviously fake and it's going to appeal to a small minority of people. But this is just hypothetically, but imagine a separate reality here in a vacuum where we don't know anything about Trudeau, and you make the claim that he's corrupt. That's more believable because that isn't as outlandish as the other one. It may be true, it may not. Who knows in this hypothetical situation? But that's where the problem really lies. Now, in terms of data, they've summarized it well. It's about trust and transparency. We have to be able to trust these companies and believe that they're telling us what the actual reality is of it. We have to know what's going on with our information and be okay with that process. we understand that data is the lifeblood of these companies, really. We need them to just tell us what's going on so we can respect the process further. There's a middle ground and it's key to find it. We have to be able to trust them, which is not the case right now. It's hard to trust these giants because they have a history and a track record of pulling one over the consumers behind their back. That's not transparent, it's not respectful, and you're not fostering a good environment going forward. If you want to lose customers, that's the way to do it. So another thing that's funny to mention is supposedly Facebook, Twitter, Google, and a plethora of other tech giants and companies support this contract. It's written and they've given their go-ahead. They say it's a good idea, but I'd like to see what they say when the pen hits the paper. Will they sign a binding agreement holding them accountable to these values over here? It's easy to say that you casually support a notion that, yeah, we approve this message, but when accountability comes into the picture, that'll be the true test. I don't expect a lot of them to hold up to that. They want to absorb all the goodwill here that they can, saying we believe in data privacy, respecting each other, and all the good things and the possibilities of the internet. But what have they done? What do they continue to do? That's the question here. It's all about the action. You can say whatever you want, but I won't be convinced until they start doing things and we find a way to hold them accountable that they agree to. So that about brings me to the end of our discussion for today. If you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a review and share. That will help our channel grow. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Perri Platform. I highly suggest you follow me. So, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.